Hey folks, I'm in Black Horse Lane in Addiscombe, and in this video I'm going to tell the story of a house that really should have featured much more in Croydon's local history than it has. So I'm going to tell you the story of Woodside Court, and it's a house through time story where we talk about the house but also the families that live there and their stories. Now this all started when I looked at a map to pick an angle for how I was going to cover Addiscombe in video. And in 1894, in this particular part of Addiscombe, so this is near Lower Addiscombe Road, all I saw was Woodside Court and the Black Horse Inn. There really wasn't much else. So it was a case of digging around and finding out the history of that house, because it was enough to be one of the main buildings on there, but what was its story? Now this is Teevan Road, just off Black Horse Lane, joins up with Lower Addiscombe Road near the shops. And Teevan will feature very prominently in this story. There is one initial observation I want you to make, and that's that the building styles in Teevan Road are very different across the board. Some of that will be down to modern development, but others for very good reason that I will share with you later. So 1838, the tithe map had a building at the location of Woodside Court and the Black Horse Inn. Nearby there were things like the convent at Ashburton Park and the military academy, but there wasn't much else here. Now the landowner and occupier was a Mr. William Stephen Watton, and the documentation shows that there were various buildings, hunting meadows and fields. Remember, it was very rural back then. Information on William Stephen Watton himself is actually quite scarce. I dug around a bit. I did find his will, which, handwritten, not very well copied, so quite hard to pick out the details, although there are one or two things that help to back up the story that I'm telling you today. And remember, look at the different building styles in Teevan Road, all to be revealed. Now, there was an interesting story I found in an 1838 newspaper about a member of Mr. Watton's staff who thought he heard some thieves in the house, armed himself with a loaded blunderbuss, went to look for them, found no one, and on returning back to the house, accidentally discharged the firearm, which burst and, quote, shattered his right hand almost to atoms. The 1841 census was the first year that they actually did census returns. The information was quite scarce. It's typical to see the location and then blocks of names of families, not necessarily listing the exact properties that they lived in. But the Watton family are shown as living in Woodside. William, a farmer, wife Maria, daughter Maria, and 3 staff. So quite well to do. Having staff was quite a thing in the larger houses back in those days. William Watton died in Lambeth in 1846. His wife died also in Lambeth in 1851. I don't know the exact connection with Lambeth. It was in Hercules Buildings, which is quite near the Thames, not far from Lambeth Palace. So they've had a large property portfolio, central London base, and out here in the countryside of Addiscombe, Woodside area. In 1851, on the 29th of March, there's an advert in the London Morning Herald for an executor's sale following the death of Mrs. Watton, including household furniture, farming implements, 8 cows and calves, a wheat stack and effects. So about the Teevan family. John Teevan was born in Cavan, Ireland. He was a surgeon, a fellow of the Royal College of Surgeons, and married Mary Watton on the 18th of June 1838 at St James's Church in Westminster. Mary's residence, according to the marriage certificate, was Lambeth. Both fathers were farmers by profession. Mary's father was William Stephen Watton. As well as living in Richmond, they'd also previously lived in Kennington. And in 1848, there was a tragedy because 3 sons all died within a very short time of one another of scarlet fever. And I do wonder whether that type of illness, there was a lot of deaths from tuberculosis and that kind of thing at the time, forced people to look out, if they had the means, out to the relative rural setting of Croydon as it was then. In 1851, that time of the census, the Teevan family are living in Richmond, so that's John, Mary, 2 sons, 1 visitor, one servant, one footman and one nurse. There's no entry that I could find in 1851 for Woodside Court, and that could be because it was being part of an executor's sale following the death of Mrs. Watton. So here we have Woodside Court Road. Take a little walk along here. In 1851, on the 14th of September, Alice Mary Watton Teevan was born in Woodside. Father John Teevan, gentleman, mother Maria, or Mary Teevan, formerly Watton. In the 1861 census, the family have grown. We've got John and Mary, 3 sons, 2 daughters, 1 visitor and 7 servants. In 1864, John Teevan subscribed £100 or donated £100 towards the construction of the O'Connell Monument in Dublin. £100 was quite a lot of money in 1864. We're probably talking about 15,000 now, and it was documented as the single largest subscription made. So he kept close to what was going on back in his home country. There were also some court cases involving John Teevan. 1866, Charles Gates from Bedford Park in Croydon was summoned by John Teevan for writing an indecent word upon the gate of his house, Woodside Court. The case was not proven and Mr. Gates was discharged. 1868, William Denman was charged with stealing 10 plums from the property of John Teevan. He had worked for Mr. Teevan for 18 years. The prison was ordered to pay a nominal fine of 3p and 3p for the plums. There was laughter in court as this was read out. The judge had words. In 1869, James Skeets and Frederick Langridge, both of Windmill Bridge, Croydon, were charged with stealing some gooseberries from the property of John Teevan. It was a Mr. Hutchinson who was, quote, building the Black Horse Woodside for Mr. Teevan, unquote, who saw the incident. Langridge was discharged as there was no evidence against him. Also, Hutchinson had to pay costs of 9 shillings and 5 shillings for Langridge's loss of time. Skeets was ordered to pay 5 shillings. 1871 census, John and Mary Teevan, living at Woodside Court, 2 sons, 2 daughters, 1 visitor and 5 servants. In 1873, John Teevan's horse Kilmore came second in the Woodside Plate horse race at Croydon Races. I made a video about Croydon Races and the history thereof, so feel free to look that up. Link in the description below. And in 1879, John Teevan spoke at the Quarter Sessions in Surrey, where they considered the application for a licence for Croydon Races. The licence was granted on the basis they didn't exceed the permitted 17 race meetings per year. I get the impression that was something they had done before. They kind of broke the rules and ran too many races. You may be thinking then, how big was Woodside Court? Well, doing a very, very rough and ready mapping calculation using a drawing of the boundary of Woodside Court from an old map and overlaying on something that we can see today, the Woodside Court main mansion was about the size of the parade of shops from Croydon Norton along to Addiscombe Pharmacy on Lower Addiscombe Road. It wasn't positioned there, it was positioned a bit further back and along. But if you wanted to say, well, if I looked at it, how big was it? Croydon Norton to Addiscombe Pharmacy will give you that guide. It's a reasonably good sized house. On the 19th of June 1882, the Sportsman reported of a sale of live and dead stock and greenhouse plants, also a number of thoroughbreds, some of which were related or descended from Kilmore, being John Teevan's horse that had raced at Croydon Races. In 1882, the Paddon family took a lease out on Woodside Court. And we know this because there was a report of the birth of their son in the St James's Gazette. On the 7th of October 1882, there was a break-in at Woodside Court Mansion. And in the story, it mentions a morning room, a smoking room, servants' hall, and various staff. So we were considering the size of the property, and if it had all those various rooms and staff, it really was something quite substantial. And that, to me, lends prominence to the fact that I think it should have been documented more in the history of Croydon. That's why I'm doing the video. In 1883, the Croydon Guardian and Surrey County Gazette made reference to a set of elections, showing a list of committee members, including John Teevan of North End House, late of Woodside Court. On the 22nd of March 1884, John Teevan died, his address being given as North End House, Croydon. Also, that was the location for Gordon Boys' School In Queen's Road Cemetery, there's a large family plot for the Teevan family that I visited. Right in the centre of the overall cemetery, there's some buildings that you kind of go around if you want to carry on to the second half of it. Just to the left there, if you're coming in from the main Queen's Road entrance, you'll see the Teevan plot. And a big thanks to the staff who managed the grounds there, because they cleared away some of the weeds and plants so that I could take some photos and do some footage. So appreciate the support there, guys. Now, I'm revisiting Teevan Road to give you another chance to take in the architecture. So in 1884, there was an advert in the Epsom Journal. Sale instruction by executors of the estate of the late John Teevan, a valuable freehold building estate consisting of a pair of cottages, 17 acres of meadowland having 3,850 feet of frontage to existing road, and by the formation of 2 other roads. Whilst not specifically called out, I believe those 2 other roads that have frontage would be Woodside Court Road and Teevan Road. In 1887, there is a newspaper ad for a grand bazaar under the patronage of the Lord Lieutenant of the County of Surrey, the Mayor of Croydon. And basically the great and the good attended. It was opened by Her Royal Highness Princess Frederica, and it was held in the grounds of Woodside Court, Croydon, over a Friday and Saturday on behalf of a fund for rebuilding the church. In 1889, there's a newspaper advert for various furniture and furnishings from Woodside Court following the expiry of the lease to John Padden. So it's quite interesting to see what items were being offered for sale there. So it says, having received instructions from John Padden Esquire on the expiration of the lease, to sell by auction the elegant and highly finished furniture of the bedchambers and reception rooms, among which are ash, walnut and birch bedroom suites, nickel-plated and other bedsteads, capital bedding, massive and very handsome oak dining room suite, richly inlaid drawing room suite, walnut library suite and bookcases, mantel, bracket and wall clocks, crystal and other chandeliers, carpets, brilliant pier glasses, overmantels and chimney pieces. There was a lot going on, a lot for sale, very high-end stuff. The 1891 census entry is quite brief. There's a Joseph C. Ellis, a gardener, living with his family in Woodside Court, and I wondered if that was kind of in between different owners. He was just sort of looking after the property. In June 1894, there's an instruction from the trustees of the late W.S. Watton Esquire to sell by auction Woodside Court. So was it always available on a lease? It would suggest perhaps that was the case. And it was to sell it in one or more lots on an important and valuable residential or building estate in this rising neighbourhood, consisting of a superior detached residence standing in its own beautifully timbered and park-like grounds of about 16 acres, having extensive frontages of over 1,900 feet to 2 main roads with excellent stabling, a range of glass houses and entrance lodge. That description alone shows you that if you were in any doubt over whether this was just some nominal little property or something more grand, surrounded by quite a lot of land, glass houses, that kind of thing, it was indeed a substantial house, worthy of recognition. In April 1898, the trustees of the late W.S. Watton put the Black Horse Inn up for sale, stating it comes with excellent stabling and lock-up coach house. And it says the property is situated in the midst of a district which is being gradually developed for building purposes. Now, in 1899, we have another change and another name. On the 11th of February, the Croydon Times reported on a number of cases where dogs were kept at large unmuzzled. One of the guilty parties was Fanny Wright of Woodside Court, Lower Addiscombe Road. So what do we know about Fanny Wright? In the 1901 census, Fanny E. Wright, head of house, aged 41, single, and a sick nurse. And there are a total of 17 boarders in the house, mainly of young age, and with either disabilities or learning difficulties. Most are shown as attending school. Also listed are 11 servants and 1 visitor. So Woodside Court at this time is shown as really a specialist care home. In April 1906, there's an ad for the sale of excellent freehold building plots, known as Woodside Court Estate. 1907, Dr. John Morrison Hobson, born in China and a surgeon, MRCS, and former president of the Croydon Natural History and Scientific Society. He's listed in the 1907 edition of the Medical Register as living at Woodside Court, Lower Addiscombe Road. 1909, there's sale instruction for part of the Woodside Court estate, referred to as a building estate, and offered as plots for large or small buyers. Teevan Road is mentioned, but also Beta Road, that's B-E-T-A. I think that would have become Woodside Court Road. Haven't found any other reference to it. Could have been like a holding name for what would be Woodside Court Road. Now this next piece is really quite key. The Lloyd George survey that was done in 1910 has a description for Woodside Court. A brick, stucco and slated house standing in 3.5 acres of grounds. Original accommodation about 4 sitting rooms and 10 bedrooms. Since 1909, all but a small portion of the house has been demolished and roads cut through the grounds. Stabling and bungalows, 4 included. So that's a really helpful statement that describes what was seen on the ground at that time. In the 1911 census, we have Dr. John Morrison Hobson with his wife and daughter, along with 11 boarders, 2 servants and 1 visitor. Comparing that to the 1901 census, the boarders in 1911 were more mature of age generally. On the 3rd of June 1911, the Croydon Express had a small ad under board and residence for Woodside Court, Lower Addiscombe Road. Beautiful grounds, tennis, croquet, etc. 1911 map shows Teevan Road laid out and part of Woodside Court Road from Black Horse Lane, and buildings already fronting Lower Addiscombe Road, pretty much as they are today. In 1913, Croydon Guardian and Surrey County Gazette have a sale notice for the first portion of materials from the above residence, Woodside Court. An auction without reserve, so there's building materials such as 4,000 slates, 5,000 paving bricks, stone piers, columns, landings, chimney pots, baths, basins, stoves, all sorts. It's literally a house clearance on steroids. 1914 map. On the south side of the road there are some shops but little residential development, albeit all the roads are marked out. So these are the roads connecting Lower Addiscombe Road to Bingham Road. In the 1930 map, Woodside Court still exists with frontage to Lower Addiscombe Road via the grounds and the entranceway, but not much has changed from the previous map. Now, between 1930 and 1933, I can only assume there was a huge building boom. Well, we know that so many houses were built in the 1930s, because between the 30 and the 33 map, literally everything is how we see it today. All the roads on the Bingham Road, Lower Addiscombe Road side, all completed, all got houses. And this area where we are now, Woodside Court gone, with one little bit that I'm going to talk about in a minute. And Teevan Road and Woodside Court Road are open, connecting Black Horse Lane to Lower Addiscombe Road. Now, I did mention earlier about Teevan Road, and hopefully you've been looking at the video occasionally when I pointed the camera ahead of me, because that's a great example of how this road was developed. It's pretty much the same here to a degree with Woodside Court Road, but I think in Teevan Road it's obvious that as the different plots were sold, different builders came in with their own building signature and style and built the properties. So it wasn't just one builder winning the contract and having sort of carbon copy houses all the way down. It was sort of different builders, different times, in different parts of the road, no doubt. Anyway, let's go round to this secret reveal. Right, I'm entering the Co-op car park, this entrance being in Black Horse Lane. So this is the rear entrance to Co-op. And folks, I believe this is a remaining section of Woodside Court. And there are some clues. Firstly, there's the description from the 1910 Lloyd George survey. But if you look at the design detail, there's some stucco work. There's classic Victorian design on the windows. The sun's a little bit in our faces today. This property has been here for quite some time. Let's have a look around the other side. Where more Victorian beauty is revealed. And I can show you on an aerial view, this literally is cut off on that wall on the side there. It's sheared off down the side. So it's likely that the actual footprint would have extended across there. And as I mentioned earlier, Croydon, Norton, across to Addiscombe Pharmacy. Some of that detail, the window shapes, the brickwork, we see on plenty of other houses, well, across the board. I mean, this would have been built or maybe extended in the mid-19th century, but they're very much a signature style of Victorian architecture. Not necessarily a really tall house. If I do an overlay on the maps, you will see where there is a complete alignment between the original map that got this whole story of mine going in 1894 and what we see today on a satellite. And again, the aerial view helps to sort of tie it all together because you can see where it was cut off. So I have to say, it's, for me, really quite something. Sometimes the only remaining parts of some of these properties might be an old wall or post or something like that that we see sometimes around places like Park Hill in South Croydon. This started as, how do I find an angle to start covering Addiscombe in my videos? Saw that this was one of the very few buildings around, dived in, and have to say it's been a wonderful story. We now know why Teevan Road is called Teevan Road. There seems to have been a collection of surgeons drawn to this place. Well-paid job, professional job, could have afforded a house like this. Don't have complete detail other than an assumption that it was the estate of William Stephen Watton that held the property until it was a trustee's sale much later. I always want to find evidence that we can see and touch and be up close and personal with. So I'm delighted to tell you the story, and I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, please hit like. If you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, please hit subscribe. And if you'd like to support what I do, please consider joining as a member. There's a button below this video, and that'd be really appreciated. Look after yourselves, and I'll see you in the next one.